Genesis chapter 2, 15 to 20, and it's called The Message. God took the man and sent him down to the Garden of Eden to work the ground and keep it in order. God commanded the man, "You can eat from any tree in the garden, except from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat from it. The moment that you eat from that tree, you're dead." God said, "It's not good for the man to be alone. I'll make him a helper, a companion." So God formed from the dirt of the ground all the animals of the field and all the birds of the air. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. Whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. The man named the cattle, named the birds of the air, named the wild animals, but he didn't find a suitable companion.
Well, welcome to part 2 of our stewardship series on what it means to be a faithful steward. Last week I talked about God setting up the system based upon proportional giving. It was the 11 tribes of Israel setting aside a 10% for the tribe of the Levites to be able to have opportunity because they couldn't own land, and what it means for us to be faithful in not just what we give, but in the way that we give. And so Lord asked all of us to give a fair and equal share, and that's based upon proportionality, and so we use the 10th system or the tithing system, which is proportionate giving based upon a ratio rather than a fixed amount. Today I want to talk about stewardship in a little bit different sense and get away from what we were talking about last week was that proportional. I want to go back to the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. God invites us to be partners in the story of creation, and here in this passage from Genesis that you just heard, that God has laid the firmament of the earth, divided was the waters, land from land, the sea, the sky, put everything in its place. And then God has created mankind, which we call Adam, and says to Adam, "I want you to be a partner with me in this process." God does not name the animals. Rather, God entrusts that to Adam and says, "Go forth and give names to these creatures and see if you can find a suitable one to be a partner with you in the process." So Adam begins this process of naming the animals that are around Adam. And in that, when we name something, we have some claim, some ownership to it. That there's a connection that is made, that creation of a relationship is defined by the words that we use to describe it. For example, we might use many different ways of describing God as a way of defining that relationship. And the ways that we understand who people are around us, and the titles that we use, those define the relationship. Here is Adam being invited by God to be a partner in the creation process of naming and defining the world around Adam, to understand who Adam is in relation to everything that is living that surrounds Adam in the garden. And so Adam begins to give names to all these creatures, and as Adam names all the creatures, not one of these creatures is suitable for Adam to be a partner in the way that God has made Adam a partner. Now we know as the story goes on, based upon the premise of it, that Adam falls into a sleep and God takes a rib from Adam, and out of Adam is created Eve, and then there is man and woman, and this establishment of two genders opposed to before, where Adam, we only know of a single gender. And Adam is not male without female, and female is not female without Adam. It's only in the relationship of those two terms is there identity and understanding. It's a way of defining relationships and who we are in correlation to one another by who we are in proportion and relationship to others around us. How are we the same? How are we different? How do we define those relationships? It's interesting in the story of Genesis, the purpose of why Adam is placed in the garden and Eve is placed in the garden with Adam is that they are to be co-workers or partners in the process of maintaining and sustaining the garden. They're caretakers of what God has created. God creates, mankind or humankind on the sixth day, depending upon what translation of the Bible that you're you're looking at, and on the seventh day, God rests. Basically, God passes the work on to those who have been placed in the garden to take over as caretakers, to maintain and to preserve it. We as humans in the world that we live in, we have inherited this creation that surrounds us. We have been blessed with so many resources. The oceans, the airs, the beautiful nature that surrounds us, the flowers, the trees, the animals, the birds, even the insects, the fish of the sea. This is all ours to be able to enjoy, to be able to have a sense of ownership of, in relationship and meaning in the work that we do. But somewhere along the way, greed has entered into our world, and we have polluted and corrupted and destroyed the garden. I love that song, tear down paradise and put up a parking lot. You might know it, right? Look at the world around us. We destroy so much of the forest and habitation that we have, and we put up all these city streets and concrete buildings and paved roads and paved parking lots, and now the sun reflects off the surface of the earth, and the fossil fuels that we put in the air around us, and even the snow and ash that falls on the polar ice caps, all these things are beginning to affect this climate and this planet that we inhabit together, that's supposed to be here to provide for us, and yet we've destroyed it in so many ways because of corruption and greed and envy and jealousy, and the fences that we've built between us and our neighbors, and where we define plot lines of things can no longer grow in a natural way, but are now grown in a very organized fashion, boxed in way that is not sustainable. The purpose of us is to be partners with God, to maintain this creation. And so when we look at the world around us, we have our individual claims that we want to hold on to of what's ours, our sense of ownership. But we also have to step back and realize that even though we might enjoy ownership in a few things, ultimately it is God who has complete ownership over all creation. And while God allows us to live in the garden and enjoy the blessings and the fruits of the garden, we're also called to share in the responsibilities of caring for the garden and taking care of it, that all life may prosper and be blessed through it. Somewhere along the way, we've kind of abandoned this idea of being caretakers of the earth and developed a sense of some entitlement of, this is our plot of land that we own. I heard a story years ago about George Washington, who had sent some folks to go out on the Western Front to the Native Americans to negotiate the purchase of land from them. And when they came, to the Midwest and the area that Washington and the United States government wanted to basically be able to purchase, in whatever reason or way that they wanted to do this, that they wanted to purchase this land, and the Native Americans didn't understand what the Europeans described as land ownership. They didn't look at the land and the creatures and the things upon the land as something that they owned. Rather, they saw the world as a painting, and that we as humans are just one part of the painting. We're no more important or significant than the birds in the air or the animals that walk on the land. We can't own a river or a pond or a lake or something like that is moving. We can't control the clouds that pass over the airspace above that. So much of what we use to define the real estate of ownership, that concept did not translate well when these brokers were trying to come and be able to purchase this land, because they didn't understand the land as something that they owned. They understood the land as something that they were called to walk upon and care for and be in partnership with as equitable partners. That there was equality that they had with all living things, and that there wasn't a sense of entitlement to claim something that something else could not claim. That if a bird landed on a spot where a person sat, no one could say that that's their place that they own. That the eagle that landed there had just as much right and ownership as the person who might have sat there. So as we look at the world around us, as we think about stewardship, think about the world in the context of, we don't own it, right? We rent it. We are caretakers of it. It belongs to God. It is shared to us for a proportion of time to be faithful and responsible in caring for it. And one of the things that the church needs to look at in the 21st century is how do we do global sustainability as part of our ministry? How do we work in partnership to be able to make this world more inhabitable for all, for the protection of life? How do we provide things like clean water? How do we provide energy that sustains us? How do we be able to provide for sanitation and the growth of food and the distribution of food to be able to get access to those who need it? Rather than to tear down every vineyard, every field, every piece of farmland and turn it on over into a subdivision because everybody wants a square box, rather than seeing the big picture that God sees, that we need to work together in partnership of not saying this is mine and I'm not going to share it with you, but rather how is this ours and how do we work together to be able to maintain it and sustain it together. If the church is a garden, and the way that Adam and Eve thought of a garden, it's not an individual garden or a family garden. It is a community garden that we need to share in. So when we think about stewardship and the concept of the church, it's not just about, the campaign that we're doing with the pledges and things of that sort. It's also about how are we faithful stewards in managing the resources that God has given us, and looking at the planet and looking at the climate and looking at the needs of our neighbors, and finding ways to be able to maintain and sustain this planet that we live on for everybody. The church is unique. We've lost our voice a little bit, but at the same time, we are still strong enough as an organization to be able to move forward, to be able to promote things like climate change, and to be able to impart the wisdom of what the church can do together as a community to create sustainable models. I love the fact that here in Weymouth, as you come in, you see all the buildings and all the parking lots that we have around here, and here's this little patch of grass right in front of the church. And here in this city, we still have grass. Now behind us, we have a lot more grass with the playground that's out there and the park that's out there, but the idea of equal access to be able to have the ability to be able to have grass to walk upon, and for there to be clean air and trees and things, and that we don't tear it all down, but we think about the quality of life for all living creatures upon the planet. There's not as many animals here because there's not as much woods as there once was for them to be able to live in and sustain. And we are not being faithful partners in sharing creation with our neighbors and with all the things that God has created, including the animals. It's our job to be caretakers of the earth, to be able to maintain, preserve, and sustain life. And so the church needs to think about ways to be able to invest in being more energy efficient, to be better in terms of being environmentally friendly, in the ways of cutting down costs and cutting down on the use of resources and hazards and things of those sort, to be able to return to the purpose that God gave to Adam in that garden, to be a partner and a caretaker in the garden, to maintain it and sustain it. So with that said, let us think about the ways that we can go forward to push initiatives that will help us to be able to create a better world for our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come, in creating and promoting and advocating for more sustainable models of equality, of climate, and access to resources for everybody that inhabits this planet together. Allow me to offer this prayer. Gracious God, thank you. Thank you for the beautiful places, the mountains, the rivers, and the oceans, the beauty and the way that they re-energize and renew and refresh us. Allow us to not put pollution into the earth, or to be greedy and take things out of the earth that makes it unsustainable, but allow us to share equally and faithfully as stewards of this blessing that you have given us and the creation shared with us. In your name we pray. Amen.